Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Which means in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of all the world. I want to begin today's broadcast with our traditional greeting of peace. Again, Assalamu alaikum, or peace be unto you. And we want to welcome our friends in South Africa, the United States, and around the world to this week's edition of A Conversation with El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan. I am pleased to be your host, coming to you once again through the Salam Media platform out of Johannesburg, South Africa. Salam Media is an online portal for humanitarian journalism. We don't just report the news, we advise you on what you can do about it. Our topic for today is Message to the White Man in America. My guest for today's conversation is an old and dear friend, Sheikh Mansour Ansari, and a new friend, relatively speaking, Ustad William Hakeem Brianis. Brother Mansour is a Muslim American with a Lebanese Christian background. He is known for his activism in the field of Islamically based journalism and for his expertise in the Persian rug industry. He's a family man with a lovely wife and two beautiful daughters and 5 grandchildren. Ustad Halim, author of the book we will be discussing this afternoon, entered Islam in 1996. He began a decade-long study with Sheikh Khalil Majdalawi in 1998. In 2007, he was granted permission to call to Islam and to teach its sciences. He later traveled to Syria to familiarize himself with the Arabic language at Jamia Abu Nur, and traveled to Morocco and Malaysia to sit with senior scholars of Hadith and take benefit from them. He studied with prominent scholars at the Cordoba Academy for Classical Islamic Studies, where in 2015 he was honored to be the first to graduate the Hafid Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani Hadith program, receiving his license to teach. He has been honored to receive licenses in the classic texts of the sacred sciences from several prominent scholars of our time. And in early 2020, he was awarded a doctorate in philosophy of religion from an interfaith seminary via correspondence. He continues to reside in Baltimore, Maryland with his wife and children, where he teaches in his local community. It's a real pleasure to have both of these respected brothers with us for today's conversation. Without any further ado, let's bring them both on. Assalamu alaikum, my brothers.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Welcome to A Conversation with God. Brother Mansour, let me start with you. I have a 3-part question, Aki. How did you and Ustad Halim connect? What is it about this book, Message to the White Man in America, that caught your attention? And what is your relationship to this project?
I'll start with the third question. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. My connection is only because I'm in the book business. I've been, ever since becoming a Muslim 50 years ago, I've been known as the book guy. That's part of that question. How I connected with Sheikh Halim, the author of this important book, is I was hanging out at one of our pizza places here in Atlanta called Halal Pizza. It's a Somali enterprise. And one of the brothers, American brother Akbar, had a copy of the book, and he said, Mansour, this is something right down your alley. Message to the White Man in America. I said, wow, what a title. And then when I realized that the author is a very special scholar and a humble man, he said, this is not my idea. This book is a template of Elijah Muhammad's book that he wrote 10 years before his death. He wrote in 1965, Message to the Black Man in America. So in that book, as the author will ably explain, he told the black man in America that you've been the victim of the American imperial project for 400 years, and your only solution is to, of course, join the Nation of Islam with their, what we call, self-righteous Sunnis like to call the heterodox beliefs. Whereas Sheikh Halim, our current author in the year 2021, has written a book, Message to the White Man in America, on the template of the message of Elijah Muhammad, Message to the Black Man in America. And so he said that he has the same number of chapters, the same chapter headings, but instead of calling to the Nation of Islam heterodox beliefs, he's calling to straight up Islam. And so this became a very important project to me because for years and decades, even you and I, Brother Mauri, we've discussed 20 and 30 years ago, what's going to happen when we're doing real well with the black community, mashallah. We have beautiful Muslim brothers and sisters. But those white guys in those office towers with those neckties and briefcases, we haven't made much progress with them. Somehow, if they enter into Islam en masse, as the author says in the book, it'll definitely change the world. So I'm going to, we'll say a number of things about the good and bad and ugly of white America. And there's plenty of good, plenty of bad, and plenty of ugly. We know the history. But if they come into Islam as the solution to their problems, this would absolutely change the world. So that's the answer to those three bullet questions.
Mm-hmm. Ustad Halim, you write in the introduction of the book, quote, "The goal at the heart of this work is to serve as a call to every single human who reads it. It is a summoning to faithfulness and uprightness. But more than this, it is a call to freedom and self-determination. Despite the title and the repeated referencing to my own people, the white man in America, the message in this book is universal and intended as such. This doesn't detract from my sincerity in my address to my own people. The title is not a misnomer. It is first and foremost a message to the white man in America, but it is also a call to Islam, which is a universal message for all of mankind, regardless of race, nationality, language group, culture, geographical location, or time. Further, the message herein is practical for any group of believers, regardless of race, nationality, or heritage. The book itself is set upon a template, and so the topics discussed in each section, and indeed in every chapter, for the most part, were predetermined for me. What was left for me was to make an original work calling my own people in the modern age to the guidance of God Almighty. One advantage the original had was that it was mandatory reading for everyone who entered the Nation of Islam, end quote. My first question to you, Brother Halim, what inspired you to write a book of this nature, built upon this template, a book that is both thought-provoking and provocative, intellectually, spiritually, and politically?
Bismillah. Alhamdulillah. MashaAllah, it started with Twitter, right? It started with Twitter. So Imam Mark Manley, who is currently in California, he tweeted something along the lines, and this was back in 2014, if I'm not mistaken, towards the end of 2014. He tweeted, when will an African American rewrite Message to the Black Man in America, correcting the mistakes therein? And he said, and when will one of the white brothers, I believe he used the word Caucasian, but he said, when will one of the white brothers be brave enough to write the first edition of Message to the White Man in America? And so I was like, I'll do it. I'll do it. And honestly, when I started the project, and you can see this, maybe you can see it in the first couple of chapters, there's a transitional state in the work where when you start reading it, it's kind of almost like a lighter reading, and then it becomes heavier. And part of the reason is because when I started it, I actually had in mind, oh, this is going to be kind of like a spoof. It's just, I'm going to play with this. And so when he says black man, I'll say white man. When he says the Nation of Islam, I'll say Islam. And, just flip it on its head. But I never read Message to the Black Man in America before. I never had a reason, right? And so when I started this project, it forced me to pick up the book. And as I read through it, I realized that it's a lot heavier than, honestly, let's be real about this. In Message to the Black Man in America, Elijah Muhammad talks about the, big-headed scientist Yaqub, who invented, through genetic manipulation, he created the white man. And then, and so all of these things that it speaks about, that are, for lack of better words, heretical and far-fetched together. But so I thought that it was going to be an easy thing. But as I read it, I seen that he was a very serious person who had a depth to him in addressing the problems of his people. And when I realized that this wasn't something to take lightly. It wasn't something to joke with. And so I switched gears and I started to take it very seriously. And in doing that, I actually ended up having to research whiteness. So just to give you a quick background about myself, not too much, but I was born and raised in the projects, and I come from an interracial family. And so though I'm white, I don't come from what's traditionally understood as a white background. And so I actually bought books and had to do research on whiteness and, to actually
Right.
address this. And so I wanted to address the needs of the people of my people here, the white people in America. And so I actually wanted to be able to do something for them that Elijah Muhammad really did do for the African American community of his time. And that is pull them out of a way of thinking and show them a better way of being. And so again, this is really what sparked it all.
Mm-hmm.
What a wonderful reply.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed, brother. You want to say something about that reply, Brother Mansour?
You see, there's an expression we've heard a long time ago saying, there are white people and then there are white people. In other words, I'm from Lebanese parentage.
Yes.
If my ancestors didn't come here 130 years ago, then I'd be some Arab laying down on the side of a hill in Syria or Lebanon somewhere. But the Syrians and Lebanese came to America to be, quote unquote, white people. But really, if you're not a WASP, if you're not a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, then you're kind of what we Lebanese call we're like a wannabe white man, wannabe, never gonna be. In other words, we thought everything was real nice between us and white America on September 10th. But on September 11th, we found out that there's only one white man in this house, and it's not us. And so Sheikh Halim William Brianis, the author of this book, also admitting that he's not from a WASP background, he's from an interracial family. But in America, when you look at me, you see a white man. Unless you know who I am, and you know that I'm of Lebanese background, and that I have the right, because of the struggle of black people in America and their history of 400 years, I have the right to identify as who I really am, a Lebanese Arab American. And so we also have to pay tribute, not just to Elijah Muhammad personally, but to the Nation of Islam. And I'm sure many of their sincere listeners will come across this video, this interview. We Muslims in America are safe to practice our religion largely because we operate under the shade of the sword of the Nation of Islam. Even though we don't agree with their heretical beliefs, okay, I'm not down with Yaqub. I'm not down with the white paint and black paint. I'm not down with so many things, whatever. We know the beliefs, but still, we are here and prospering. And the immigrant brothers from over in those other countries in the Middle East and Far East, they are here because of what black people have sacrificed. These immigrant Muslims, our brothers, would not even be here if they hadn't hung enough African Americans here in Georgia, where the ground is drenched by their blood, to change the laws of immigration in 1965 to let non-whites into this country. And they want to be white people, but I say, hey, brother, you want to be, but you're never going to be.
Mm-hmm. You know something, your both of your responses reminded me of a very provocative movie that I saw years ago. And sometimes when I'm addressing certain issues and that movie comes to mind, I encourage folk who haven't seen it to see it, because it speaks uh, tremendously to the balkanization within tribes, you know, especially as it pertains to this issue of whiteness and the totem pole of priority, uh, uh, in terms of, for lack of a better description, the class hierarchy of whiteness within whiteness. And
Yes.
that movie is Gangs of New York.
Yeah.
For those who haven't seen that movie, it was made years ago. I
Leonardo DiCaprio.
strongly, what did you say, Mansour?
Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah, Leonardo DiCaprio is one of the stars in it, and it is a very powerful movie that reveals the history of, you know, the immigration cycles coming through Ellis Island into New York City, and how the different tribes uh, among whites,
Yeah.
you know, how they fought against each other in order to gain supremacy within the socio-political order that was being established in New York City in the Big Apple.
Right.
And this is it's a very profound movie. It's so anyway, not to digress. My second question, and I think, and it's important. I think it's also important because my brother, our brother, Ustad William Halim Brianis,
Is
he
he
comes
just say
from a Greek
Halim?
background. He comes from a Greek background, right?
Yeah.
Your roots are
So,
Greek.
and that's actually something I wanted to address, is because when I say I come from an interracial family, let me be clear. I have siblings who are mixed between white and black.
Mm,
Me, I'm strictly European. When I say that, I mean that on my mother's side, my family came to this country in 1865 from Württemberg, Germany. From my father's side, they came from Greece, and so it's still European in that sense. When I
right,
said that's the interracial, but there is this level of whiteness. That's a reality, and if you
right,
don't fit that blueprint of white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, then you're not considered white. And if I could just, and maybe this will come up in the questions as well. There's a serious problem because a lot of people avoid, or they are afraid of entering Islam because it's for the other, and there's a fear of losing their whiteness,
mm,
and that's a reality. And
right.
so alhamdulillah, now inshallah. Your question, I'm sorry, see.
Brother Halim, whose idea was it for this provocative cover design, an upside down American flag against a black background? Why was it chosen?
So everything about this book is my work, and for better or worse. And I say that I had a brother help me to edit it. It still needs work, But even the fact that it doesn't have, and somebody's taken pot shots at me for this, but the reality is it doesn't have an index. It doesn't have a bibliography. There's a reason for that, and that is I was rushing. This was a project that had gone on for 4 years, and I felt an urgency to get it out. And to take and make a big bibliography and an index would be another year. It would take another year. So I put it out. But everything about that book, the design, all of it, the layout, again, for better or worse, it's from myself. And the reason I chose this particular cover is because it's a symbol. It's an internationally recognized symbol of distress when you put the flag upside down. It used to be a Navy signal, yani something that they would use on ships at sea. So if the ship would no longer operate, then they would hang the flag upside down so that if someone saw them, they could come and help them. But this is the purpose, because it's an indication, it is a sign of distress. And America is in a very, very distressful state right now, and it needs rescuing.
Mhm. Well said. and I agree wholeheartedly. Before I read in the book, and I've read a good portion. This is a big book, brothers and sisters. This is a big book. I've read parts of the book, maybe about a third, close to a half of the book I've gotten through so far, and it's a very, very important read. It's a very valuable read. But when I saw the cover, I immediately knew instinctively what the message was that was being conveyed. This is a country that is indeed in distress. And part of that distress is rooted in the fact that since its inception, there have always been two Americas. There is the America that is projected to the world, the America, quote unquote, the beautiful. And then there is the America that is not so beautiful. The America that is the very real, the reality of that we've seen much more of, significantly more of throughout this country's history, and making the observation that was made by one of its founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, and an observation that you can find on the wall of his memorial in downtown Washington, D.C. I tremble for my country when I reflect God is just. His justice cannot sleep forever. Even more significant, even more telling. So I understood when I saw the upside down flag that this was a symbol of distress, and it was very applicable. Third question, chapter 90, the framing of a people. What went into your decision, Brother Halim, to include that? And let me say personally, I'm glad you did.
So again, we have to understand that, in a lot of situations, my hands are tied. And so one of the things is that this template, I literally had the e-copy because I didn't have a hard copy. The e-copy of Elijah Muhammad's message to the black man on one side and my tablet on the other side. I'd use my phone and the tablet, and I'm just reading a line, writing a line, reading a line, writing a line. And sometimes I'd have to pause to do research or whatever, but generally speaking, that's how this book was written. I'd read a line, I'd write a line, read a line, write a line. And so when I came to his chapter, and honestly, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I remember what it was. I don't remember what it was, but surely he's talking about an event that happened. And when he's speaking about an event that happened, then I felt the need to speak about an event that happened. And what greater event in our time than 9/11? And the reality is 9/11 is one of those days when America changed. It changed from a state of the American dream. I was raised in the Cold War, the end of the Cold War, but still in the Cold War. And we were taught that Russia was evil because of X, Y, and Z. And then before 9/11, we were taught we were great because we didn't do these things. After 9/11, we do all those things that we were taught made the USSR evil because they did them. Blacklisting, you got to have your travel, all of these things. And so the reality is that that's an infamous day that changed America from one identity to another identity, and we have to discuss it. But what's more than that? What's more than that is that this is the introduction that so many Americans have to Islam. This is the introduction that they received to Islam. And we need to be honest and clear that these 19 people, this is the official narrative, but there's some things that don't add up. There just are some things that don't add up. So rather than get into conspiracy theories or tote the official line, because honestly, as Muslims, we need to speak the truth. We need to take a middle way. Let's just look at what happened. Let's discuss what happened, and let's look at what we can do to move forward. And I think that was really the heart of the messages. I believe, it's my personal belief, I don't push this on anybody, and I try to refrain from addressing this too much in the book, but I don't believe that 9/11 was plotted out by 19 people and they carried it out and they were alone. There's just too many things, such as the NORAD, no fly, identify friend or foe, NORAD being told to stand down, the passports floating down gently despite their being made out of paper while the black box not being found. There's so many things that don't add up. This is my own position again. But if we focus on that, then we lose sight of what really happened that day. And what really happened that day was a shift in America. Everything changed that day. And so we have to discuss that.
Brother Mansour, did Chapter 90 have any, pronounced impact on you when you read it?
I'm sorry, I didn't do my homework, and I had not read that chapter yet.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it's a very profound writing that the brother does in that chapter, and it really resonated with me because from day one, up until now, I questioned the official narrative, again, as you stated, not based upon any willy-nilly conspiracy theory, but just based on hard facts. The fact that, as this large body of engineers, non-Muslim engineers in the West, many of them leaders in their field of structural engineering and the building sciences, they've raised their questions. Never has before or since a building been brought down, skyscraper been brought down through fire. The building coming down in its own footprint, as in a controlled demolition, coming down in its own footprint. All three of the buildings. The two that were hit by planes, and the one that wasn't hit by a plane, and the skyscrapers being built in such a way as to be able to withstand an accidental plane crash into it. The scenario of these 19 hijackers armed with nothing more than box cutters, taking over planes and being able to maneuver these planes in New York in ways that some of the most seasoned pilots that have been piloting planes for years it would have been difficult for them to do, to be able to bank an airliner in such a way that they could hit skyscrapers. I mean, there were just so many things. The Israelis that were apprehended after in nearby northern New Jersey, filming the drama that was unfolding and celebrating, and then being taken into custody, and it being discovered that these were Israelis that were held for a time and then ended up being, I presume, deported back to Israel. I mean, just so many things that just didn't make sense. So, that chapter really resonated with me. The other thing that resonated with me, brother, was the argument you made about the Taliban. The argument you made about the Taliban, which are now being once again demonized. Now, when we go back to the presidency of Ronald Reagan, one of the big conservative heroes of the conservative wing of the Republican of the American construct. Reagan, he is like a demigod. But one of the things that Reagan and those around him were saying about the Taliban during his administration was that these were freedom fighters. They labeled them as freedom fighters, and it was because of the Taliban who are armed by Uncle Sam in its battle against the then Soviet Union, that the Soviet Union was brought down. But then, after everything was said and done, the Soviet Union collapses and Uncle Sam remains the sole superpower on the block. Then the Taliban, who were freedom fighters, then become enemies. And a reminder of that old political canard that there are no permanent friends or enemies, only interests. So we saw that play itself out. And then the Taliban demonized. One of the things that you pointed out in the book, accurately so, was that one of the reasons why the Taliban was able to take control of Afghanistan in the way that they did when they were labeled freedom fighters is because of the violence and the corruption of the warlords. They were welcomed by the people of Afghanistan. They brought stability to Afghanistan. They did away with the poppy cultivation, etc. SubhanAllah. And then, now, and then when it became convenient, for them to be demonized and then used as a basis for another war, then
this is another issue that, and I tried to touch upon it. I hinted at it in the book, but it's a serious thing. Everybody asked the question, well, why would America invade Afghanistan? What's the purpose behind the invasion? They have no natural resources. I mean, we take what we take. But we have to understand 70% of our opium, 70% of the opium of the United States came out of Afghanistan. And when Mullah Omar sanctioned, made the fatwa that anybody who was caught producing it would be put to death. This is when we invaded. And the first thing that we did was give them the poppy seeds to start the production again. The number one reason, in my opinion, this is just me, the number one opinion why we invaded Afghanistan is because we wanted to take control of the poppy fields, because Mullah Omar and the Taliban illegalized the poppy trade, the opium trade rather. And so there's realities here. And even one of the reasons the Taliban is continuously successful, and I've never been to Afghanistan, I don't know the Taliban, I'm not, supporting them, like, I'm just speaking from what I've garnered, but one of the things about the Taliban, the reason that they remain successful is because they go into an area, they liberate that area, and then they leave that area. And so they're constantly helping the people and getting out, And that's why they still have the people support to this day, even though, again, in our media, they continue to be demonized.
Brother Mansour, even though you haven't read the chapter, I'm sure that you've got a gist from this exchange here, and being a very thoughtful, intellectual, book distributing brother that you have been for many years. What are your thoughts on what you just heard?
One of the reasons I haven't gotten so far as chapter 90 is because I've been busy promoting and selling the book. And I wanted to let our listeners and viewers know that my email, if you're going to PayPal me a $25 amount, it's going to cover shipping worldwide. It's going to be Mansour786@yahoo.com to order your copy. As it says right there, PayPal me $25, and I'll get that book in the mail to you. And yes, the Muslims have been under the microscope since 9/11, long time ago, and we have the right to ask these questions. It's interpreted as a conspiracy theory by those who don't want to think about this intellectually and use wisdom. But since we're under the microscope, we're the ones on the stand, and we have the right to ask those questions. How about the building number 7 that collapsed and was not hit by any airplane? It's just the building just went down. Why are we responsible for that? And we Muslims have to apologize for that. What about the I-395 goes right next to the Pentagon? I mean, when I drive to Washington, D.C., I-395 goes right by the Pentagon. It's barely a quarter of a mile to your left. And you're trying to tell me that a plane going 530 miles an hour hit that Pentagon? There's no way. First of all, they never found a plane over there. And if there was a plane, it would have had to be like 12 feet above the expressway to hit that building like that. And so there's no way it could have come down, like from a couple hundred feet. No, if that point going 500 miles an hour, that plane would have had to be like barely a basketball basket above the highway. It just didn't happen. Yet we Muslims have to apologize every time we talk. We have to say, we have to say that we had nothing to do with that, and Islam is about peace and all that kind of stuff. We have to apologize constantly for things. If a Muslim robs a convenience store in Denver, Colorado, they have to ask us, is Islam violent? Meanwhile, they called me a terrorist, but that's like the pot calling a kettle black. It's just not fair. So we have the right to ask these questions. Tell me about building number 7, and I'll stop asking these questions.
I remember reading where the owner of the property, the owner of that building,
Yeah.
reportedly ordered the building to be pulled. He ordered
No,
it.
it wasn't him. Afwansi, I want to be clear here. First and foremost, we have to understand they put an insurance policy on all of the buildings not long before this happened. This building 7 housed CIA documents and
Yes.
records of the monetary records. I forget which organization, but anyway, it was the fire department that said pull it, right? And so they
Wow.
they gave the go ahead to pull it. Now this is the thing about that. I just want to say it wasn't the owner of the building. This is the thing about that. They already had to have the demolitions in place, right? Because you can't go into a burning building and set up explosives. They already had to have it in place to pull that building that same day,
Agreed.
right? And it fell the same exact way towers 1 and 2 fell.
Mm-hmm.
That's
That's right, in its own footprint. All right, this next question is for both of you. In his famous and now historic letter from Mecca, which inshallah ta'ala we're going to share in its entirety at the end of this program, El-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, aka Malcolm X, said the following: if white Americans could accept the religion of Islam, if they could accept the oneness of God, they too could then sincerely accept the oneness of men and cease to measure others always in terms of their difference in color. With racism now plaguing America like an incurable cancer, all thinking Americans should be more receptive to Islam as an already proven solution to the race problem. End quote. What are your thoughts on that observation? An observation that was made well over a half century ago. Let's begin with you, Brother Halim.
You see, it's a complex question, because the reason that it's a complex question is because the answer is yes and no, right? The answer is yes. I think that if white America could embrace Islam and come to know God, really come to know God, and more than just coming to know God, live according to the guidance of God, then I believe that the mentality of superiority, inferiority, the manipulation, I think those things would go away, God willing. But at the same time, I don't think that the message of the Quran, and this is something, I think that message of Islam would do away with racism, right? So I want to be clear here. That's why it's a yes. But I think that part of what Malcolm was saying, and I'm going straight off of the words, I'm not trying to interpret what he's saying, is that they would no longer see color. And the fact of the matter is that I don't think that that's a message of the Quran. I believe that part of the message of the Quran is that we recognize one another, that we come to know one another, our different tribes, our different nations, and there are realities there. The fact of the matter, and this is one of the reasons why we can address our own people, because we have different experiences, we have different cultures or heritages, and so I don't think that Islam calls us to do away with that or ignore that or lose that. Rather, I think that the message is that we don't become people who make that a reason to oppress others or look down on others or have a negative opinion of others. And so, for example, even somebody in my own family, even like my children, for example, if they commit a crime and someone else of another race commits a crime, then they are treated equally, even because we stand out for justice, even against ourselves or our own kin, right? And so I think, and whether they be rich or poor, and this is important because sometimes we want to stand out for justice for the poor, but we forget that we have to, rather we want to stand out for justice for the rich, meaning calling them to justice, but we overlook this for the poor. And we want to call people to stand out for justice, whether they're against anyone. This is what I'm saying to you. And so my point here is that I don't believe that the message of Islam is to become colorblind or to see all of humanity as homogenous, but rather to see us as one single race, one single. We're all equal. We're all. We're all equal. I think is the best way of saying it. Economically, judicially, spiritually, but at the same time, we should recognize our differences and have a true respect for that. And so I believe that the message of Islam will do away with racism, right, which is really what we want. But I don't think that the call is to lose ourselves, lose our own identities.
And as a point of clarification, not equally, not equal economically, but
fair. So we're not fair. I mean, the rich are the rich and the poor are the poor. But I mean that there should be no oppression between the two like
that's
this.
right.
Mashallah.
That's right.
No.
We're equal in terms of our humanity, and we all have equal entitlements to justice and fairness, etc.
And if I can,
right.
I know I just want to throw one thing out there, and so I want to be I know that we're running out of time, and Mansour definitely deserves his opportunity to answer this, but I want to say that what we believe is that there are 7 God-given inalienable rights that every single human has, whether they're male or female, old or young, rich or poor, black or white, it doesn't matter. Every single human being has a right to faith. Every single human being has a right to life, a right to intellect, a right to honor, a right to lineage, a right to wealth, and a right to property. And so to usurp that property, to usurp those rights are an injustice and oppression. And our job as Muslims is to uphold those rights, to establish justice for everyone for those rights, whether they be Muslim or non-Muslim, inshallah.
That's right.
Now, so this, I just wanted to, as a point of clarity, inshallah.
Brother Mansour, your thought on that quote from Malcolm from his letter.
I think that I'd like to paint a picture for our viewers that if you see a Catholic church in Chicago or a Catholic church in Mexico or Spain, they all kind of look the same. It's a cookie cutter type of building. Whereas Islam in the Muslim world, the mosque in Nigeria has a local influence. The mosque in Turkey and Egypt and Kazakhstan and other places have their own local architectural features, meaning to say, I'm saying this because the reason why Islam became permanent and dominant in much of the world is because it became part of the local culture and it indigenized itself. And when Malcolm, our hero, when he went to those countries, he realized that the breadth of diversity in the Muslim world was one of our big strengths, and that you can be a strong Turk and be a good Muslim. You can be a strong African and be a good Muslim. You can be a strong European and be a good Muslim. He saw this up close and personal, and it changed his life. And he, more than any of our people back in the 60s, and these heroes of the Black Power movement, he was one that could make such an observation because he was, as you know, indigenized, in quotes, into our American culture. Whereas on the same day, within an hour of each other, he could speak to a Harvard or Oxford University crowd of academics and still be on the street in Harlem at 125th and Lenox and speaking on a podium there to his local people in a version and a brand of English language that they were uniquely able to understand. So I'm the kind of guy, I think I'm the oldest guy on this screen right now, and I'm there 10 years after Malcolm's martyrdom, and I accepted Islam largely because of his contribution. I could say that I'm a spiritual descendant of Malcolm X because he saw equality for what it was. Of course, he had to go through a lot of unique instances. He had to see through the erroneous teachings of much of the Nation of Islam. And I don't say that in an effort to embarrass or damage the brothers in the nation. But for sure, we so-called Sunni Muslims, we're not going to join the Nation of Islam. But by the grace of Allah, many of the NOI brothers, when they want to smell the coffee, they come to the correct Islam and sit down with us. So that's his contribution. 55 years later, Malcolm is speaking loudly from the grave. May Allah accept him.
Brother Halim, we had Brother Mansour and his beautiful family on in conversation with us some months back. It was early last year. We had a beautiful conversation, and both Brother Mansour and his wife, Sister Kathy, and they shared with the audience how they came to Islam. It was a very beautiful story, very beautiful and engaging story. Wondering what was the process that brought, and since I've referenced that, let me say to those who didn't catch that broadcast, you can go to the Afia Foundation's YouTube channel, and you can catch that in some of our other programs that we've done. Brother Halim, what was the circumstance that brought you to Islam, that led you to Islam? I think you said in 1979 it was?
No. I would have been a small child then.
I'm sorry.
1996.
1996. Yeah. I'm thinking about myself in my beginning of my own journey, but go ahead.
Alhamdulillah. So I want to start by first saying, I really want to thank Sheikh Mansour for what he just said, because that was a beautiful analogy. I actually started looking around for a pen and paper, because one of the things is that this is a difference between Islam and Christianity that needs to be reflected upon, is that in the Muslim world, outwardly we're all different, right? And really the best example I see of this is women covering, right? But outwardly we're all different, but inwardly we're the same. In those masajid that all look different, when we enter in, we all pray the same, right? Whereas a Christian church, while they're all cookie cutter and they all look the same, if you was to go anywhere in the world, you'd have to learn the etiquettes of that masjid. I mean, that church or this denomination. So outwardly they're the same, but inwardly they're different. Whereas the Muslims, outwardly we might be different, but inwardly we're all the same. MashaAllah, we're united at the heart. So I deeply appreciated that analogy, or that picture he drew. Alhamdulillah, thank you for that. As for my entrance into Islam, the fact is that alhamdulillah, it was a bumpy ride, and so I'll cut it very, very short, inshallah. My mother, as a small child, she started out as a Baptist. That's what she was raised as. Later, she got kicked out of that church, because one of the things about the Baptist church is that they say that they're not racist, and they all have black congregants and white congregants, but they don't allow interracial couples, right? And so my mom actually got kicked out of the church when I was a small child. And she went on her own soul searching, and she raised me to believe that, she doesn't know what it is, but there is a truth, right? And so at some point she became a Jehovah's Witness. In my formative years, I was a Jehovah's Witness myself until I hit my teens and I ran the streets. But, so I had this understanding that there is a truth. And so I was a seeker. I mean, I studied Christianity, I studied Buddhism, I studied Taoism, Wicca. I studied all of these different faiths, and I actually studied them. And I was locked up a lot. And so between the ages of 15 and 21, I spent more time locked up than I did on the streets. And at one point I was with these Nigerian Christians, and they told me all about Islam. I knew all about Islam. And so when I was, I believe I was 21, I was 20 at the time. So when I was incarcerated, and there was a Muslim and a Christian arguing outside of my cell, and I'm trying to read a book. I didn't have any faith at that time, and I'm trying to read a book, and they're arguing and getting loud. And so I got up and I said, "You're wrong and you're wrong." And I told the Christian why he was wrong, and he got angry and walked away. I told the Muslim why he was wrong, telling him all these things that I heard from the Nigerian Christians. And he laughed at me. The Muslim laughed at me and said I didn't know what I was talking about. So I didn't like that. Alhamdulillah. So I went and I started studying Islam. I got everything I could out of the jail library so that I could find something wrong, so that I could go to this Muslim and say, "Look, your religion is wrong." And well, it didn't work out that way. Alhamdulillah. I couldn't find anything wrong with it. And so I was left with a choice of either admitting that this is the truth and being a hypocrite, keep running the streets, or admitting that it's truth and entering into it. And so I didn't want to be a hypocrite. So I entered Islam while I was locked up. And there's a lot of funny stories involved. Like when I first went to take my Shahada, the brothers were arguing. They didn't want to give me my shahada. They was like, no, you do it. No, you do it. I had to wait an extra week because of my whiteness, right? Nobody wanted to give the white guy his shahada. And this was an understanding. And even in prison, like we had a homework assignment, and it was what brought you to Islam. And you'd be amazed how many people got up and said, because I hate white people, right? So there was this experience. There's just this reality. But there's actually a lot of, I mean, that's the gist of it. When I came home, I had an opportunity, of course, to go back to who I was. I didn't tell anybody I was Muslim because I didn't want anyone to think that I entered Islam in jail for protection. Or I did this. That was my identity, going to jail, coming home, going to jail. So I didn't want anybody thinking that I was scared or anything like that. So I kept my Islam to myself. Nobody on the street knew I was Muslim. And then when I came home, I was like, no, I'm a Muslim. So I had that choice to go back if I wanted. And my real entry to Islam was when I came home and everything was open to me, and I said, no, I'm a Muslim. When I verbalized it on the streets, there's a lot of story to this.
Interesting. Interesting. Brother, you and I have something in common. My journey to Islam began as a teenager in lockup. I was in the Burlington County Jail, and I was 17, and the jail had a little library in it. And subhanAllah, up until that time, I was the kind of person who, I was much like Malcolm. When I was in school, before I started getting in trouble, I was a very exceptional student. But then, once I hit the skids, something very traumatic happened in my life, and it just took me off, into a self-destructive path, and which again culminated in 17 years of age, stealing a car, subhanAllah, in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and trying to drive to Washington, D.C. This was during the May Day festival, and having stolen a car that had bad tires.
Oh.
But it was the qadr of Allah. I ended up on the New Jersey Turnpike, getting out of the vehicle, and I'm starting to hit. There was a lot of hitchhikers out on the road at that time, trying to make it to Washington for the big Memorial Day festivals. And I got my hand out. I saw the police officer come up.
Oh no!
To the vehicle. I was about maybe a quarter of a football field away. He obviously saw me walking with my briefcase. My suitcase, and he comes around. He asked me if I was in that car. I said no. He tells me to get into his cruiser. He backs up, and subhanAllah, I had the knockout keys in my case. He opens up my case. He searches through it. I had a knife about this long. It was just a souvenir knife, but I had it, and it was considered a deadly weapon because of the length. And then these keys, and subhanAllah, it took me a while to have to get this car to turn over. But when he took the keys and he went back to the car, it turned over right away. And he got this big grin on his face. I'll never forget it. This big grin on his face. I got you now. And I ended up in the Burlington County Jail. But this was the qadr of Allah. This is how something good can come out of adversity. I ended up being drawn to the little library that they had. And the book that caught my attention in the library was, guess what?
Autobiography of Malcolm X.
The Autobiography of Malcolm X.
Allahu Akbar.
I took that book back to my cell, began reading it, and that book changed my life. It's a reminder, of something that Malcolm said. He said, if a man is properly motivated, for some of us, this is what it takes. If a man is properly motivated in prison, he can change his life. This was my change. And I got out. I joined the Black Panther Party in New Haven, Connecticut. And then from there, after about 6 or 7 months, I ended up going into the Nation of Islam. And the rest, as they say, is history. MashaAllah. So we have that in common, brother. Our light began to come on in lockup. Let me ask both of you, invite both of you brothers to take 1 minute. We're at the end of the program. Take 1 minute, both of you, to just make whatever final comments you want to make to the audience that are viewing us live and those who will see it later. Let's begin with you, Brother Mansour.
I would say in my last 45 seconds here, the point I'd like to leave the audience with, especially white Americans, is that even though Islam in America has a black face, it has an African and an African-American image, you can still be a proper Muslim and stay who you are and what you are. Islam will become indigenized to the white American community as it has already done in the black community. And Islam, quite honestly, needs a strong white contingent. And you can be your own person. You don't have to change the way you walk and talk and dress. And Islam allows you to be yourself. And I like to leave that message with our people, that if the white Americans come into Islam en masse, like they did in Bosnia some centuries ago, it would definitely change the world. Because you've heard, if you sneeze in America, it's like pneumonia in India. So whatever the white man in America does, there'll be a huge impact on the rest of the world, and Allah knows best. And don't forget to send that $25 to my PayPal account, and I'll send you this book right in the mail. $25 to PayPal at Mansour786@yahoo.com. Mansour786@yahoo.com, and automatically your shipping address will be in there, and I'll get that book out real quick, okay? Assalamu alaikum.
And the description, in the description that we attach to this this video presentation, this broadcast, we're going to both include Brother Mansour's email address, which will give you PayPal access. But for those who would feel more comfortable in sending a check or money order in the mail, it will, inshallah ta'ala, will include that information as well. So you have both ways to be able to access this very important book. With that, your final minute, Ustad William Halim Brianis.
Bismillah. Alhamdulillah. This is a minute, mashallah. A final message. What I would say is buy the book. Alhamdulillah. Having said that, the real message of the book is that we're human beings. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God Almighty, created us, and He sent to us guidance. And that guidance calls us to be upright people. The best of people. Inna alladhina amanu wa amilu salihati ulaika hum khairul bariyah. The best of people are those who believe and do upright good deeds. That's the best of creation. And so this universal message of Islam, the universal message of all prophets, is to establish, protect, perfect your relationship with God. Establish, protect, perfect your relationship with His creation. Everything else is there to support that. Islam is there to support that. Our whole life, the purpose of our life, is to establish, protect, and perfect our relationship with God. Establish, protect, and perfect our relationship with His creation. And I pray to I pray to God that everyone be guided to this message. And of course, He guides whom He wills. But so this is I just want to make that my final message is that this is the universal message. This is the message that every prophet came with. Love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and love for others, and love for your neighbor, that which you love for yourself. And so I don't think that there's any better message than that.
Alhamdulillah. This has been a real pleasure for your brother Saalakhan, and I'm sure that it has been a pleasure for those who have tuned in live, and for those who will see it later, inshallah. I want to conclude with something very special. I came across, there are a number of versions of Malcolm's letter from Mecca. There are a number of abbreviated versions. I came across a platform that had copies of Malcolm's handwritten letter, his handwritten letter, pages of it, followed by a printed or typed translation, and it was quite riveting to read it in that context. Given the season that Muslims around the world are presently in, the first days of the sacred month of El-Hajj, this is where we are right now, the time of the great pilgrimage. I think it only fitting to conclude today's program with a reading of Malcolm's letter from his pilgrimage to Mecca, known in Arabic as the Hajj, in April of 1964. This is what Malcolm said. I have just completed my pilgrimage, Hajj, here to the holy city of Mecca, the holiest city on earth, which is absolutely forbidden for non-Muslims to even rest their eyes upon. This pilgrimage is the most important event in the life of all Muslims, and there are over 226,000 who are here right now from outside of Arabia. From Turkey came the largest contingent, around 50,000 in over 600 buses. This refutes Westerner propaganda that Turkey is turning away from Islam. I know of only two others who have made the actual Hajj to Mecca from America, and both of them are West Indians who are also converts to Islam. Mr. Elijah Muhammad, two of his sons, and a couple of his followers visited Mecca outside the Hajj season, and their visit is known as the Umrah, or the Lesser Pilgrimage. It is considered a blessing in the Muslim world even to make the Umrah. I very much doubt that 10 American citizens have ever visited Mecca, and I do believe that I might be the first American-born Negro to make the actual Hajj itself. I'm not saying this to boast, but only to point out what a wonderful accomplishment and blessing it is, and also to enable you to be in a better position intellectually to evaluate it in its proper light. And then your own intelligence can place it in its proper place. This pilgrimage to the holiest of cities has been a unique experience for me, but one which has made me the recipient of numerous unexpected blessings beyond my wildest dreams. Shortly after my arrival in Jeddah, I was met by Prince Mohammed Faisal, who informed me that his illustrious father, His Excellency Crown Prince Faisal, ruler of Arabia, had decreed that I be his guest. What has happened since then would take several books to describe, but through the graces of His Excellency, I have since stayed in beautiful hotels in Jeddah, Mecca, and Mina, with a private car, a driver, a religious guide, and many servants at my disposal. Never have I been so highly honored, and never has such honor and respect made me feel more humble and unworthy. Who would believe that such blessings could be heaped upon an American Negro? But in the Muslim world, when one accepts Islam and ceases to be defined as white or Negro, Islam recognizes all men as men. Because the people here in Arabia believe that God is one, they believe that all people are also one, and that all are brothers and sisters in one human family. I have never before witnessed such sincere hospitality and the practice of true brotherhood as I have seen it here in Arabia. In fact, all I have seen and experienced on this pilgrimage has forced me to rearrange much of my thought pattern and to toss aside some of my previous conclusions. This adjustment to reality wasn't too difficult for me to undergo, because despite my firm conviction in whatever I believe, I have always tried to keep an open mind, which is absolutely necessary for the flexibility that must go hand in hand for anyone engaged in an intelligent quest for truth. Such a quest never comes to an end. There are Muslims here of all colors and from every part of the earth. During the past days here in Mecca, while understanding the rituals of the Hajj, I have eaten from the same plate, drank from the same glass, and slept on the same bed or rug with kings, potentates, and other forms of rulers, with fellow Muslims whose skin was the whitest of white, whose eyes were the bluest of blue, and whose hair was the blondest of blonde. I could look into their blue eyes and see that they regarded me as the same brothers, because their faith in one God, Allah, had actually removed the white from their minds, which automatically changed their attitude and their behavior toward people of other colors. Their beliefs in the oneness of humanity has made them so different from American whites that their colors played no part in my mind and my dealing with them. Their sincerity to one God and their acceptance of all people as equals made them, so-called whites, accepted as equals into the brotherhood of Islam along with non-whites. If white Americans could accept the religion of Islam, if they could accept the oneness of God, they too could then sincerely accept the oneness of men and cease to measure others always in terms of their differences in color. With racism now plaguing America like an incurable cancer, all thinking Americans should be more receptive to Islam as an already proven solution to the race problem. The American Negro could never be blamed for his racial animosities because his are only a reaction or defense mechanism. His subconscious intelligence has forced him to react against the conscious racism practiced initiated against Negroes in America by American whites. But as America's insane obsession with racism leads her down the suicidal path, near to the precipice that leads to the bottomless pits below, I do believe that whites of the younger generation in the colleges and universities, through their own young, less hampered intellects, will see the handwriting on the wall and turn for spiritual salvation to the religion of Islam and force the older generation to turn with them. This is the only way white America can ward off the inevitable disaster that racism always leads to. Hitler's Nazi Germany was best proof of this. Now that I have visited Mecca and gotten my own personal spiritual path adjusted to where I can better understand the depth of my religion, I shall be leaving in a couple of days to continue my journey into our African fatherland. Allah willing, by May 20th, before my return to New York, I shall have visited Sudan, Kenya, Tanganyika, Zanzibar, Nigeria, Ghana, and Algeria. You may use this letter in any way you desire. El-Hajj, Malik El-Shabazz, Malcolm X. Alhamdulillah. This is the unabridged narration of Malcolm's letter. And, may Allah Ta'ala continue to bless his message to be a benefit. Again, I want to thank both of my brothers, my friend of many years, Sheikh Mansour Ansari, and my brother Ustad William Halim Brianis for joining us today for today's conversation. I know that those of you who caught this live, you're going to share this as widely as you possibly can so that others can benefit from what was said here today. And as always, we will now conclude with a beautiful prayer, supplication found in the Quran, Suratul Asr, inshallah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal Asr. Innal insana lafi kusr. Illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihati. Wa tawassaw bil haqq. Wa tawassaw bis sabr. Which means in translation, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, by the token of time through the ages, verily humanity is in loss, except those who believe and do good, and exhort one another to truth, and exhort one another to patiently persevere in the pursuit and maintenance of that truth and justice for all. Peace be unto you. Assalamu alaikum.